Thank you guys for coming out tonight. Damien, thank you very much for coming all the way to Seattle.
Thank you for having me.
You have been through something that I think not that many people have been through, a sort of grind that feels like it might never end, and sort of you wonder if one day we'll just run into the next. And I speak, of course, of the media tour you've been on for this book. Life After Death. What is more mundane, prison or doing a book tour?
In some ways, the book tour is actually a little more stressful. At least when you're in prison, you're not being stared at by 400 people.
Can I just get a show of hands? How many people know about Damien's story because of the Paradise Lost films? I was surprised to read in your book that when those HBO producers showed up, they weren't there to shoot a movie about how 3 men were, or boys at that time, were wrongly convicted, right? That was something that they figured out while they were shooting a movie about what they thought were satanic murders.
Exactly. What we were told was that there was a very small article in the New York Times that Sheila Nevins, who's the head of the documentary division of HBO, saw in the paper, and she thought it was an open and shut case. So she contacted Joe Berlinger and Bruce Sinofsky and told them, why don't you get your cameras and get down there in the courtroom and get this. And after they started filming it, they realized it wasn't exactly what they had been led to believe it was. And thankfully, they got the entire thing, the entire trial on tape, and they took part of it and made a documentary out of it.
Was that part of your thought process in allowing them to interview you and film so many of these kind of important and intimate things for you, was to try to get the word out? I mean, did you have a sense of that even back then when you're like a, 18-year-old kid or something?
I don't think I really had a sense of that. I just felt like I didn't have anything to hide. I had nothing that I was trying to cover up. There was nothing that I didn't want the cameras to capture. So I said, let them in. Doesn't bother me any. But at the same time, I think I was still in such a state of shock and trauma that I probably wasn't thinking much of anything at all.
Let's talk about your childhood a little bit, because you write about it in the book, and by your own description, it was at times pretty bleak. Would you say you had a sort of average childhood for that part of the world, or were you more unfortunate than some other kids in terms of how you lived and your stepfather and just the sort of the bullshit that you put up with?
I think there's in some areas of the South, I think it was pretty typical. In the South, you usually have all these class divisions, like what people usually think of as redneck, and then you have what we were, which is even below that, which is just like white trash. We had absolutely nothing when I was growing up. Dirt poor doesn't even come close to articulating it. When we did finally move up into a trailer park, to us that was taking a huge step up in the world. We had running water, electricity. To us, that was the lap of luxury after what we had experienced. There were times when I was a kid when we lived in places that we would literally have to haul water in buckets back to the house and then heat it over a fire and pour it into the tub just to take a bath.
Did that feel to you like that was going to be the rest of your life in one way or another, being a pretty poor person in that part of the world, or did you kind of have aspirations and dreams to get out of there?
I did. I wanted to get out of there, but at the same time, it's almost like that was all I'd known my entire life, so there was part of me that didn't believe that anything else actually existed. When I would watch TV shows about, places like New York or Los Angeles, or I would see shows where people went to college, to me that was something that it didn't really exist. It's on TV, but I don't think there was anybody in our world that ever experienced anything like that. I have a 9th grade education, and that's more than anybody else in my family does. So I wanted out, but at the same time, part of me didn't believe it was even possible to get out.
As everybody in this room knows, you were a teenager when the police swept you up and basically put you on trial for the murder of these 3 boys. What was the point, if there was one, where you realized this was really happening? I mean, actually not a mistake, not something that was going to be ironed out with one phone call. Was it When you were arrested, was it during the trial? Was it 10 years into being in prison?
It happens gradually. You know, you sort of go back and forth. When they arrested us, I was really just a little more than a child myself. You know, I was 18 years old, and I was still very, very naive about how the system worked. You know, I'd been raised with this belief that, you know, the system is based on innocent until proven guilty, and I thought, there's no way they can actually prove you've done something that you haven't done. You know, that should be scientifically impossible. But it wasn't. They did it, and it was, that was when part of it clicked into place, whenever they come back and say guilty. But then there's also whenever they come back and they start sentencing you to death. You know, you're hearing yourself sentenced to death, not once, not twice, but 3 times. That's when you realize nobody's going to step in and help you. Nobody's going to put a stop to this.
Did you think there was a pretty good chance you would be executed for this?
I think most of the time, no. After I saw how corrupt the system was from the inside, I lost all faith, all hope, all belief that the system was ever going to right its wrongs. But in '96, whenever the documentaries started coming out and I started hearing from people all over the world, and as technology kept expanding and more people would hear about the case and start, you know, doing benefit shows or writing letters or even making donations to the defense fund, whatever it was, that's what kept me going. That's what I had faith in. That's what I had belief in. The outside world, people who were doing whatever they could. That's the reason I thought I wouldn't be executed.
Did the Paradise Lost movie ever show in the prison?
Never. I tried to watch it one time. The attorney I had got a court order from the judge. He said, well, this is relevant to the case, so he should see this. So they set up a TV. They put me in a cell with a TV. They started playing it. I made it through maybe 15 minutes of it, and I couldn't take anymore. It was, I understand why they had such a huge impact on people, because for me, watching it again, the closest thing I can compare it to is when you hear Vietnam vets talk about having flashbacks. That's what it was like. It was like being there in the courtroom again. And it's so overwhelming that you don't know. You just feel something huge, but you don't know if you should be laughing or crying. You're just, I don't think there's even any words in the English language to articulate how it makes you feel, what it does to you. So I couldn't watch the whole thing. I didn't watch any of the second one. I watched the third one just because we went to the premiere in New York, but I honestly don't remember most of it because it happened right when I had just gotten out of prison and I was still in, you know, a really, really deep state of shock. And I don't remember a lot of what happened in the first month or two that I was out even.
Is there a misperception when people meet you now or write you letters or see you at a premiere like that, where they figure you're out, so you just must be happy-go-lucky, and you're still feeling a lot of this stuff?
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, there is a tremendous amount of anxiety and stress and all sorts of other stuff. You know, I was in solitary confinement for almost 10 years whenever I got out. So I went from that one day to almost a decade of solitary confinement to just being thrown back out in the world. And I wasn't ready for the sensory overload that it was going to bring. And I had to learn, you know, old things over again while learning new things at the same time. I had to learn to walk again. For almost 20 years, I hadn't walked anywhere without chains on my feet. So whenever I first got out, I would trip downstairs, I would trip over my own feet. I almost had to be led around like a blind person, which my eyes are getting a little better now, but my eyesight was even worse whenever I first got out.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a moment, because I saw you on TV this week doing an interview, and I thought you were just being a cool customer with your sunglasses on. Those are prescription, and that's a result of having been incarcerated.
I can see probably 4 inches in front of my face without these glasses. I didn't see sunlight for almost 10 years, and I was kept in a really small space, and whenever you're in a small space, your eyes never have the chance to see anything more than, you know, a couple feet away, so you gradually lose the ability to focus on things. I can't even see arm's length anymore.
You write about the brutality of these guards in the various jails that you were in, prisons rather, that